Hello, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. This is a weekly program where we tell y'all what is really going on here in the city of Kalamazoo, the state of Michigan, the so-called United States, and the rest of the world from a working class perspective, generally calling out the BS and capitalism, all that good stuff. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 WIDR or Western Michigan University. Well, we're going to be, again, as always, we're going to be covering a lot of topics on the show today. Going to be joined by my co host Lawrence in about 40 minutes or so, and we're going to be diving into, again, the interruption at the big Kamala Harris rally in Detroit last week, which we're going to dissect quite profusely. As again, I mean, probably the bottom line lesson is, don't condescend to people in your base who are concerned about let me check my notes here, a genocide. Um, we're also going to talk about some a unfortunate an unfortunate instance of police brutality on the east side of the state. And a couple other interesting stories. We'll probably finish up talking a little bit about the Olympics. But I want to start today's show. I've got a couple of stories. So me and Lawrence recorded last night, but there are a few really important stories that we didn't get to. So I kind of want to do something local, national, and international. So I've got a Michigan story here from Bridge, Michigan. I thought it was very interesting. It kind of outlays or analyzes the election results across the state, and it's highlighting how, and especially a lot of more conservative leaning areas, many of the people who ended up winning their primaries are people who are kind of full-throatedly supporting the Trumpist line on the 2020 elections and a multitude of other conspiracy theories while we're at it. Um, so I'm going to basically read this article. It gives us the information. I might offer some commentary and analysis as we go along. But this comes to us from Bridge, Michigan. Headline is In Michigan, Criminal Charges and Election Denying No Barrier to Ballot Victory. It's published on August 8th, written by Haley Harding. A self-proclaimed constitutional sheriff, a township clerk facing felony charges, and a county clerk candidate who wants to hand count every ballot cast at the end of each voting day sailed through the Republican primaries on Tuesday, earning themselves spots on November's ballot and likely victory. The results are a sign that many local voters in more conservative areas of Michigan don't consider it disqualifying for local elected officials to spread conspiracy theories or interfere with elections to advance the narrative that the 2020 election was stolen from then President Donald Trump. In Berry County, north of Kalamazoo, incumbent Sheriff Dar Leaf handily beat three GOP challengers. In Macomb County, Shelby Township Clerk Stan Grotz did the same. Victoria Bishop, a clerk candidate in Antrim County, claimed victory in a five-way GOP race with about 37% of the vote. In all three races, there was no Democratic opponent appearing on the fall ballot, so the three are all but sure to win their elections in November. Darleaf considers himself a constitutional sheriff. That's a term for law enforcement officials who believe they hold the highest level of authority in their county, above even the governor. Leaf has gotten national attention before for his efforts to investigate the 2020 election. If you remember some of our coverage from about 4 years ago, we talked about Mr. Leaf quite a bit. And just to dive a little bit deeper on the whole constitutional sheriff's thing. This is definitely something that we see a lot there's a lot of crossover between law enforcement and some of these right-wing paramilitary groups when we talk about this idea of like the sheriff or being the law of the land. It's kind of a spurious legal interpretation, but you see a lot of groups like the Three Percenters, and again the what is it the national I can't remember if it's league or constitutional sheriffs, but there's a lot of crossover between those groups. So, especially thinking that in context of Michigan, um, that's something worth keeping in mind. Others running as constitutional sheriff candidates across the state lost their primaries, Michigan Public found. As Brid Michigan reported in 2021, Leaf tried to seize voting machines in Berry County. He also had deputies question election clerks to try to prove the 2020 election was stolen from Trump. He was also named in an investigation by Attorney General Dana Nessel, and pay close attention to him. We got a recurring member of our show's Rogues Gallery about to pop up over his involvement in an alleged scheme led by Portage's own lawyer, Matthew DePerno, who ran for Attorney General in the last cycle, as you may remember, to get access to local election offices' ballot tabulators and to break into them to conduct tests. The investigation led to charges against DePerno and attorney Stephanie Lambert Gentilla. Leaf was not charged with any associated crimes for his alleged actions. Shelby Township's Grott, however, faces charges for his role in the 2020 fake elector scheme to replace Michigan's electoral votes for Joe Biden with those for Trump. He was one of 16 people who were each charged with 8 felony counts after they signed a false certificate claiming Trump had won Michigan. I haven't done anything wrong, Grott told the Detroit News after his win. I'm just waiting for the court date to have my day in court, and the truth's going to come out. Meanwhile, the Secretary of State's office has stripped Grott of his powers as clerk. And last year, the State Bureau of Elections sent Grott a letter that said his alleged involvement with the fake certificate undermines voter confidence in the integrity of elections. Running elections is one of the primary duties of a clerk, but Grott told the news on Wednesday that he wasn't concerned about what that meant for future elections. In Antrim County, Bishop could be the next clerk, but current clerk Cheryl Guy told Bridge, Michigan last week that she might launch a write in campaign. I wouldn't put Antrim County in that position of being stuck with somebody that might be crazy, she said. Antrim County in northern Michigan was caught in a swirl of conspiracy theories after the 2020 election because of an error in tabulator configuration that briefly caused an initial election night results to show that Biden won the heavily Republican county. Guy oversaw that election, and the results were quickly corrected, but the county has remained a target of groups suspicious of the way elections are run. Bishop's main promise to voters, as stated on her yellow lawn signs, is to restore election integrity in Antrim County. For her, that includes hand counting every ballot, a lengthy and often inaccurate process, and cleaning up the county's voter rolls by removing voters who have died or moved away. Which, by the way, for the listeners who think that sounds good in theory, in practice, and you can go back to some of our early coverage on this, but most of the time when Republicans talk about taking, quote unquote, died or moved away voters off the rolls, they go hog wild and remove as many voters as they can, especially, and if you go back to some of uh, the investigations, uh, people like Greg Palast into like the cross-check system, often they will target people with Black or Hispanic sounding names. Yeah, often vote Democratic. Anyway, Bishop and her husband, a radio host often referred to as Trucker Randy, have helped to spread election conspiracy theories that the 2020 election was stolen. Those false claims have now been repeatedly debunked, but when reached Thursday, Randy Bishop, who identified himself as the candidate's campaign manager, said they weren't theories at all. He insisted he had evidence that proved deeper wrongdoing in the 2020 election. He declined to share it, instead saying he would offer it to anyone in Antrim County who wanted it. Yeah, that sounds like some pretty compelling evidence. It's like, yeah, I have evidence. Can I see it? No. Anyway, in the races monitored by VoteBeat, only one candidate lost their election after spreading election conspiracy theories. And this is actually kind of interesting. Stephanie Scott, the former Adams Township clerk, who was ousted in a recall election, lost her Republican primary for Hillsdale County clerk, which, yeah, y'all might know Hillsdale County. It's their home of Hillsdale College, which is one of the big right-wing think tanks responsible for right-wing policy in national politics. So kind of interesting that I don't know if that can say much about the way the wind is blowing, but I just thought it was interesting that um, an election denier lost at in the seat of one of the country's biggest right wing think tanks. Anyway, Scott is facing several felony charges related to unauthorized computer access, misconduct in office, and concealing or withholding a voting machine. She's also facing a misdemeanor charge for allegedly disobeying instructions from election officials. Her attorney, Lambert Gentilla, faces similar charges in the Adams Township case. Scott did not immediately respond to a request for comment from VoteBeat in June. Scott's new attorney, Dan Hartman, moved to drop the felony charges against Scott and Lambert Gentilla. The judge ultimately denied the motion to dismiss. Scott's next hearing is scheduled for September. Anyway, if you want to read uh, that article for yourself, you can go to Bridge, Michigan. Headline of the article is In Michigan, criminal charges and election denying no barrier, to ballot victory. When we come back, we're gonna kick it up to the national level. I've got a fantastic article from Counterpunch written by Medea Benjamin. That is it's a great analysis of Cori Bush's recent loss to AIPAC. So we're going to take just a quick little break. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WITR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online. We got a Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast, the number 4 podcast in Kalamazoo. You can find that on most podcasting apps, or you can go to our YouTube page. We always, put up our episodes, especially good for the hard of hearing because you can watch along with subtitles. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello, everybody. We are back. This is Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WITR or online at widerfm.org. So this next story this was a real big blow to working class folks and our representation in this messed up capitalist system that we live in. Because one of the good ones, really, and there's not that many of them at in the congressional level. One of the good ones just got knocked out of Congress by a massive spending campaign from AIPAC, and I wanted to read this article from Counterpunch that really, me and Lawrence didn't get a chance to talk about this, and I thought this was a big story from the primary that we really should take some time to talk about. So, this was written by Medea Benjamin. It's published on August 8th. And headline is AIPAC hijacks Representative Cori Bush's race and our elections. Representative Cori Bush, a progressive black woman from St. Louis, Missouri, who is a member of the squad, and has been a powerful voice in Congress for poor people, women's rights, healthcare, housing, and Palestine, just lost her primary because pro Israel lobby groups flooded the race with outside funding. Her loss is a tremendous blow to progressives and to the U.S. electoral process itself. This is the pro Israel lobby's second win of the season. The first was the June defeat of progressive black congressman from Westchester County, New York, Jamal Bowman, who was a forceful critic of Israel's attacks on Gaza. AIPAC and its misnamed super PAC, the United Democracy Project, barged into Westchester County to anoint an opponent, white pro Israel Westchester County Executive George Latimer, and then shower him with cash. The ads against Bowman were not about Israel. Instead, AIPAC smeared the congressman's character and criticized him as a hothead who is not a reliable member of the Democratic team. In the words of president of the Arab American Institute, Jim Zogby, the race became the angry, frightening young black man versus the calm, thoughtful, older white guy. By throwing $17 million into the race, pro Israel groups turned Bowman's primary into the most expensive one in U.S. history. When Bowman was defeated, AIPAC declared the outcome showed that the pro Israel position is both good policy and good politics. On the contrary, it showed that pro Israel groups can buy elections, and it sent a frightening message to all elected officials that if they criticize Israel, even during a genocide, they may, they may well pay with their careers. And I just want people to understand how bad faith that argument from AIPAC is. They're trying to say that oh, the victory of these candidates proves that pro-Zionist, pro-Israel candidates are popular when the ads they themselves made had nothing to do with Gaza, with Israel, with Zionism, with what's going on in the Middle East whatsoever. And they basically did the same playbook on Cori Bush. I'm about to read from that, but I need my listeners to understand. All of that money that AIPAC dumped against Jamal Bowman and then Cori Bush was not spent on ads criticizing uh, their support for a ceasefire. It was spent on ads that, again, largely didn't even hit them on policy, but were basically just mudslinging, mud spearing, and all that, and just for the purpose of getting artificially, really, a pro Zionist, pro Israel candidate through the primary. Going on, buoyed by its success, AIPAC then took on Cori Bush, marching into St. Louis, Missouri, determined to defeat a black woman who was one of the most unique voices in all of Congress. Once an unhoused single mother of two and a survivor of gun violence, domestic violence, and sexual assault, Bush became a nurse and a pastor, and in the wake of the killing of the unarmed black man Michael Brown in Ferguson in 2014, she became an activist on the front lines of the movement to save black lives. After protesting in the streets for 400 days, she jumped into the political arena. In 2020, she made a successful run for Congress, becoming the first black representative from Missouri. In Bush's 2 terms in Congress, she demonstrated leadership on many fronts, including reproductive justice and abortion rights. At a House of Representatives hearing meeting in 2021, Bush was one of 3 congresswomen to share her abortion story publicly. And after the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe versus Wade, she introduced a host of bills, including the Reproductive Health Care Accessibility Act, the Protecting Access to Medication Abortion Act, the Reproductive Health Travel Fund Act, and the Protect Sexual and Reproductive Health Act. She also championed housing rights. When the COVID moratorium on evictions was about to expire, she grabbed her sleeping bag and lawn chair and organized a sleep in on the steps of the U.S. Capitol that resulted in an extension of the moratorium on evictions. Foreign policy was not her focus, but in the wake of the Hamas attack on October 9th, 2023, and Israel's subsequent bombing of civilians in Gaza, Cori Bush felt compelled to speak out. I think that was a typo. It was October 7th. Okay. Just 9 days after the October 7th Hamas attack, she had the courage to introduce a ceasefire resolution in the House. She was only one of 9 House members who opposed a resolution supporting Israel. She boycotted Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech before Congress, calling him a war criminal. As a result of defending Palestinians, she found herself in AIPAC's crosshairs. AIPAC Super PAC spent nearly $9 million, much of it coming from Republican mega donors, to buy ads smearing Bush and shoring up contender Wesley Bell, a St. Louis County prosecutor. The attacks were vicious, including ads that darkened Bush's skin and manipulated her racial features. They also distorted her domestic voting record, condemning her for not supporting Biden's infrastructure bill instead of explaining that her vote was part of a strategy to gain leverage for key social programs in the Build Back Better Act. Curiously, in the cases of both Bowman and Bush, the attack ads did not even mention Israel. But if Israel is AIPAC's singular focus, why did the ads avoid the issue? That's because most Americans, especially in those liberal Democrat districts, agree with their positions. Most Americans want a ceasefire and disapprove of Israel's military actions in Gaza. As Jewish Voice for Peace Executive Director Stephanie Fox said during a call to rally support for Congresswoman Bush, she has been a life raft for our values and principles in Congress, and she has been under attack because far right extremist groups like AIPAC are scared. Jim Zogby of the Arab American Institute agrees. Pro Israel groups are running scared, he said. They are losing the public debate over policy, especially among Democrats. Most Democrats are deeply opposed to Israeli policies in Gaza and the occupied Palestinian lands. Majorities want a ceasefire and to end the settlements, and they want to stop further arms shipments to Israel. So AIPAC hides the Israel issue and then claims the win is a victory for Israel. If we are going to stop U.S. support for Israel's genocide, prevent the Middle East from erupting in flames, and reclaim our elections here at home, we have to stop AIPAC. That was from counterpunch.com. That article was written by Medea Benjamin, who's a founder of Code Pink, um, a famous grassroots anti-war organization here in the U.S. We're going to take another quick little break, and then I think when we come back, we're going to follow up on a story we were talking about last week. See some of the fascist riots that were going on in the UK, and this is a glimmer of good news because the good people, the good anti-fascist people of the UK responded in kind, and we have a story about that. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online at the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast. You can find that on most podcasting apps. And, oh, excuse me. And you can also find us on YouTube and Facebook. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello again, everybody out there in Radio Land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. So, before me and Lawrence really get into it, I'm going to want to share one more. This is a follow up to an issue that we hit on last week, talking about some of the fascist riots that were going on in the UK. And this is actually some good news. It's a good follow up about how the good people, the good working people of the UK responded to that. I'm going to be reading from this is an article from Democracy Now!, published on August 8th. Headline is Tens of Thousands Rally Against Racism and Islamophobia in the UK Following Days of Far Right Rioting. And I'm going to be reading a quote from their interview with academic Faiza Shaheen. But just want to give y'all a little bit of context if you haven't heard about the story. This is from Democracy Now! Thousands filled the streets across the United Kingdom this week in massive rallies against racism and Islamophobia, a show of unity to counter a recent surge in far right violence. British police have arrested hundreds of right wing rioters for carrying out a string of attacks in England and Northern Ireland targeting Muslims and migrants. While the wave of violence was partly spurred by misinformation about the identity of a suspect in a deadly stabbing spree, academic Faiza Shaheen says mainstream public figures and the media establishment are also to blame for drip feeding poison into the ears of the public about immigrants over many years. And I'm going to skip down to what Faiza Shaheen had to talk about in her interview with Democracy Now! This phase of far-right activity in the UK was sparked just a week ago when there was this horrific murder, stabbing of three or more children at a dance class in Southport, which is in the north of England, and three little girls were killed. It was horrific, and that community was, of course, torn to bits. And misinformation spread online that it was a Muslim youth that had committed this crime. And immediately what happened was the far right came out. And more than that, uh, online, not just the thugs and the terrorists on the streets, but online, immediately, a whole bunch of pundits, politicians on the right started saying that this is because of immigration and that this is because of Muslims who are taking over. And this is all that sort of language that people were used to hearing in different parts of the world and in the US. And then there was this pushback saying, oh, this person isn't a Muslim. And, the BBC, for instance, reported that it wasn't a Muslim. But it was interesting even how that was said, as if they were a Muslim, that it would be okay to do what they were doing, which is what we were doing was going and attacking mosques. And that's where it first started. It just emboldened organized far right on the streets around the country, stopping cars, pulling people out of cars, beating them up, pulling hijabs off women, going to areas where they know there's lots of immigrants and Muslims and smashing cars, smashing homes. It was just a spate of terror that caused so much anxiety and fear among the community. There's been a few reactions off the back of that in the last week. We've had the government reaction, which has been more focused on law and order, these people need to be arrested. It's taken them a while to get to the point and be able to call it racism and Islamophobia. Quite a lot of pressure has been put on it for it to be called just that. Also, the media reaction, which has been really upsetting. We've heard on the BBC them call these rioters, and they've called it pro British marches, which is very upsetting. They've done a sort of both sidesing, and they're causing their trouble. But also, there's these Muslim men outside the mosque, as if them trying to protect the mosque is the same as these people coming and terrorizing the mosque. Thirdly, is the people coming out in the streets, as we saw last night, in these rallies across the country. So we expected them to be really big in London, but they were also big in Bristol and other parts of the country as well. People just saying that we don't want this violence on our streets. We reject this ideology. And, as a Muslim and as someone that has received so many messages from people that have felt very, very anxious, it was heartening to see that. But we've got to understand this didn't just start last week, and this is the outcome of almost decades now of drip feeding poison into the ears of the public. And not just the conservatives, but labor as well. And I would also say here in an American context, we're also seeing that from the Democratic Party as well. What was it just last week? One of Kamala Harris's first campaign rallies. She talked about how she's going to be even harder on the border than Donald Trump is. This dehumanizing language about immigrants gets people hurt. It gets people killed, like we just saw in the UK last week. Going on, uh, other politicians, not Nigel Farage is that kind of far right personality talking about immigration in a really negative way and Muslims as if they are the problem, legitimating these sorts of concerns. Concerns that the far right say that Muslims are taking over, or if we're in the U.S., talk about people from Latin America taking over, etc. Unfortunately, we're still hearing that quite a lot. So, this problem is about social media. It is about arresting people, but it's much, much deeper than that. It is about the politics of the far right and anti immigration, which is really deep seated in this country. Of course, they're referring to the UK, but I think that could also refer equally to here in the United States. Um, Want to close up by saying one of their parting comments on this is it's amazing to see people out in the street. That's really just the first step. We don't have, I lived in New York for a little while. It was really noticeable to me how much more organized the anti racist movement is there than here. We haven't pushed back enough on the media. We do have a government that is already saying, that they might have a point and we need to strike a balance, which is outrageous. So this is a longer term fight. Otherwise, these far right issues are going to keep happening. And we really do need to organize in our communities from the grassroots up. Again, if you want to read that full interview that is in Democracy Now!, tens of thousands rally against racism and Islamophobia in UK following days of far right rioting. All right, we're going to take another quick little break. I think I tried to maybe slide one more story in before we go to me and Lawrence's section of today's show. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us at the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast, rated the number 4 podcast in Kalamazoo. I got to toot my own horn about that sometimes. You can also find us on YouTube. That's especially useful for folks who are hard of hearing. You can watch subtitles as we go along. In any case, let's go ahead and take a quick little break. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Everybody out there in Radio Land, y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. About to go into me and Lawrence's coverage and discussion of, again, more Michigan issues, some national and international stories as well. A quick kind of this just in from Democracy Now! This got sent to me by a colleague slash comrade. This is from Democracy Now!'s headlines page, but the U.S. won't sanction Israeli military unit accused of abuse. In brief, The U.S. State Department says it will resume funding for the Israeli military's Netza Yehuda battalion after ending its probe into the ultra Orthodox group. Despite acknowledging gross human rights violations against Palestinians, the State Department said the unit had done enough to improve its standing in recent months, removing the need to impose sanctions. The announcement, the announcement came after furious lobbying by Israeli leaders. So, especially in some of the stories that me and Lawrence are about to discuss, keep that in the back of your mind in the discussion me and Lawrence are about to have. All right. Thanks again for tuning in. We are going to go now into me and Lawrence's discussion. I think we're going to be starting with Kamala's rally in Detroit that happened last week. Keep your dial locked.